Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Hub. Today's story is one of my favorites.
Let me take you back to that September morning when my life changed forever. I was Isabel Chun, a struggling art student with more dreams than dollars, running late for my internship interview at Meridian Fashion House. You know how it is when you're 23 and convinced the world is conspiring against you. That was me, clutching my portfolio like a life preserver. My vintage 1960s shift dress, the one I'd saved 3 months to buy, flowing behind me as I rushed down Fifth Avenue. The morning sun was painting the city in golden hues, and I was actually feeling optimistic for once. Maybe today would be different. Maybe today I'd finally catch a break. That's when Alexandra Torres came barreling around the corner on her sleek black bicycle, her dark hair streaming behind her like a war banner. She was late too, though I wouldn't learn that until later. Late for a meeting with creditors who held the future of her small boutique in their manicured hands. Late on rent for the tiny studio apartment above her shop. Late realizing that her dreams of revolutionizing sustainable fashion were unraveling faster than the hem of my dress was about to. The collision was inevitable. Physics, really. Two forces moving at high speed, neither willing to yield. The screech of her bike tires against the pavement, my startled yelp as I went flying, the distinctive sound of fabric tearing as my skirt caught on her handlebars. Time slowed, the way it does in movies, and I found myself airborne for what felt like an eternity before gravity remembered its job. I landed hard, my portfolio scattering across the sidewalk like oversized confetti. My dress was ruined, my knee was bleeding, and my interview was in 15 minutes. Any normal person would have been furious. But as I lay there, looking up at this woman who just bulldozed into my life, something unexpected happened. I started laughing. Not the polite, nervous kind of laugh you give when you're trying to defuse tension. This was genuine from the belly laughter that bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me, because honestly, the absurdity of it all, me spread-eagled on the sidewalk in my best dress, my carefully planned morning completely derailed by a cyclist who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine herself, was just too much. "Are you blind?" Alexandra demanded, her voice sharp with panic and irritation. She was standing over me, hands on her hips, and I could see she was fighting between anger and concern. Her olive skin was flushed, her chocolate brown eyes flashing with emotion. "No," I managed between giggles, "but I am impressed you prioritize insults over helping me up." That stopped her cold. I watched her face transform, anger melting into something softer, more vulnerable. Her lips parted slightly, and I realized she was beautiful in a way that made my heart skip. Not magazine perfect beautiful, but real beautiful. The kind of beautiful that comes from passion and determination and just a little bit of chaos. Alexandra froze because there I was, laughing despite being sprawled on the pavement like roadkill. Sunlight was catching in my wild curls, making them look like spun gold, and she could see the ink stains on my fingers from the sketches I'd been working on all night. I had a smile that made her anger dissolve like sugar in coffee, and when she finally extended her hand to help me up, when our fingers touched for the first time, the spark wasn't just from static electricity. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice completely different now, softer, with just a hint of a Spanish accent that made my name sound like music when she said it. "I'm Alexandra. And I'm usually not this much of a disaster." "Isabel," I replied, accepting her help to stand. "And honey, if this is you being a disaster, I can't wait to see you on a good day." She laughed then, and the sound was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. We stood there for a moment, still holding hands, surrounded by the chaos of scattered papers and curious onlookers, and I felt something shift in the universe. You know that feeling when you're standing at the edge of something big, something that's going to change everything? That's what it felt like. Your dress, Alexandra said, finally noticing the damage. God, I'm so sorry. It's beautiful. Was beautiful. I'll pay for it, of course. I looked down at the torn fabric, then back up at her earnest face. It's okay. I was getting tired of it anyway. A complete lie, but something about her distress made me want to comfort her. No, it's not okay. I doubt that double quote. She paused, studying my face. You were heading somewhere important, weren't you? The way you were rushing. Job interview, I admitted. Fashion design internship? Well, was supposed to be. Her eyes widened. You're a designer? Trying to be. I gestured to my scattered portfolio. Though I'm not sure showing up looking like I've been hit by a truck is going to make the best impression. Alexandra was quiet for a moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. What if I told you I might have a better opportunity? And that's how it started. Not with love at first sight, exactly, but with collision at first sight. Sometimes the universe has to literally knock you off your feet to get your attention. Sometimes the best things in life begin with disaster. 3 days later, I found myself standing in front of a narrow brownstone on the Lower East Side, clutching the address Alexandra had scribbled on a coffee-stained napkin. The building looked like it had seen better decades, with its weathered brick facade and windows that might have been original to the 1920s. But there was something charming about it, something that spoke of history and possibility. Tourist sustainable. Fashion read the small sign beside the door, the lettering hand-painted in elegant script. I took a deep breath, smoothed my backup interview outfit, a simple black dress I'd thrifted and altered myself, and pushed open the door. The space inside took my breath away. It wasn't large, maybe 800 square feet, but Alexandra had made every inch count. The walls were lined with mood boards covered in fabric swatches, color palettes, and sketches. Mannequins draped in half-finished garments stood like silent sentinels throughout the space, and the afternoon light streaming through the tall windows made everything glow with warm possibility. But it was the woman in the center of it all who really caught my attention. Alexandra was bent over a cutting table, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing a fitted tank top that showed off the lean muscles in her arms. She was completely absorbed in her work, measuring and marking fabric with the precision of a surgeon. There was something almost meditative about the way she moved, and I found myself watching her longer than was probably appropriate. Isabel. She looked up, and her face broke into a smile that made my knees go weak. You came. You invited me, I said, trying to sound casual. Though I have to admit, I'm not entirely sure why. She set down her measuring tape and moved toward me, and I caught a whiff of her perfume, something clean and woody with hints of vanilla, because I've been thinking about what you said, about sustainability, about fashion that tells a story. I frowned. I didn't say anything about that. You did. When you were laughing on the sidewalk, you said something about how your dress had stories to tell. It got me thinking. She gestured to the space around us. This is what I do. Sustainable. Fashion, zero-waste design. But I've been struggling to find the right way to tell that story. And you think I can help? I think you might be exactly what I've been looking for. She moved to one of the mannequins where a partially constructed dress hung like a question mark. This is from my new collection. Completely zero waste. Every scrap of fabric is used, but it's missing something. It's technically perfect, but it doesn't have ... soul. I approached the mannequin, studying the garment. It was beautiful, objectively speaking. The construction was flawless, the fabric a gorgeous emerald green that seemed to shift and shimmer in the light. But Alexandra was right. It felt cold, somehow, clinical. What's the story you want to tell? I asked. That fashion doesn't have to be disposable. That beautiful things can be responsible. That double quotes, she paused, looking almost embarrassed. That love and care can be sewn into every stitch. I felt my heart do a little flip at the word love, but I tried to stay professional. Okay, so how do we make people feel that? I was hoping you could show me. That's how our collaboration began. Over the next few weeks, I found myself spending every spare moment in Alexandra's studio. Officially, I was helping her develop the narrative for her new collection. Unofficially, I was falling head over heels for everything about her. The way she bit her lip when she was concentrating, the small scar on her left hand from a cutting accident, the way she spoke about fabric like it was alive. Imagine a line where every scrap tells a story, I said one afternoon, draping a piece of zero-waste fabric over a mannequin. We were working on a dress that would be made entirely from offcuts and discarded materials, but instead of looking piecemeal, it would be a celebration of transformation. Alexandra's pencil hovered over her sketch pad, and I could see her trying to capture the vision I was describing. But her eyes kept drifting to me, to the way I was moving the fabric, the way I was biting my lip in concentration. I'm trying to, she muttered, and I caught the double meaning in her voice. I met her eyes across the room, and the air between us suddenly felt charged with electricity. Liar, I said, smirking. The tension was palpable. We'd been dancing around each other for weeks, our professional relationship crackling with an undercurrent of attraction that neither of us was brave enough to acknowledge. Every accidental touch when we reached for the same fabric, every moment when we stood too close while examining a design, every late night when we worked until the early hours and then lingered, reluctant to leave each other's company. Isabel, Alexandra said, her voice husky. She set down her pencil and moved toward me. Yes, I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs. I think. She reached out, her fingers barely brushing mine. I think you're more than just helping with the collection. Before I could respond, the door chimed, and we sprang apart like teenagers caught necking. A woman with platinum blonde hair and the kind of perfect features that suggested expensive surgery strode into the studio, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor like a countdown to disaster. Alexandra, darling, she said, her voice. Honey poison. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Sarah Matthews was everything I wasn't. Where I was curvy, she was angular. Where I was warm, she was ice. Where I was struggling, she was successful. She owned a boutique in Soho, had her clothes featured in Vogue, and had the kind of connections that could make or break a career in fashion. And from the moment she walked into Alexandra's studio, I knew she was going to be trouble. Sarah, Alexandra said, her voice carefully neutral, what brings you here? I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. See how your little project is coming along. Sarah's eyes swept over the studio, taking in the mannequins, the fabric, and finally landing on me. And you are? Isabel Chun, I said, extending my hand. I'm helping Alexandra with her new collection. Sarah's handshake was firm, her nails perfectly manicured and sharp enough to draw blood. How quaint. Alexandra's always been one. For charity cases. I felt my face flush, but before I could respond, Alexandra stepped between us. Sarah, Isabel is extremely talented. She's bringing a fresh perspective to sustainable fashion. I'm sure she is, Sarah said, her smile not reaching her eyes. Though I have to wonder if mixing business with pleasure is wise. The implication hung in the air like smoke. I could see Alexandra's jaw tighten, and I realized that Sarah had picked up on the tension between us, the attraction we'd been trying so hard to keep professional. There's nothing unprofessional about our collaboration, Alexandra said coolly. Of course not, Sarah agreed, though her tone suggested otherwise. I'm actually here with an offer. Marcus Steinberg is looking for a new designer for his luxury line. Someone with vision. Someone who understands the market. I knew that name. Marcus Steinberg was one of the biggest names in high-end fashion. The kind of designer who could launch a career with a single phone call. This was the opportunity Alexandra had been dreaming of. I'm focused on my own work right now, Alexandra said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Of course. You are, but think about it. The exposure, the resources, the chance to work with the best materials money can buy. Sarah's smile was predatory, though I suppose if you're content working with ... scraps. She said the last word like it tasted bad, and I felt a flare of anger. This was exactly the kind of attitude that was wrong with the fashion industry. The idea that sustainability was somehow lesser, that caring about the environment was a compromise rather than a strength. There's nothing wrong with scraps, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Some of the most beautiful art comes from making something new out of what others discard. Sarah's laugh was like breaking glass. How poetic. But darling, poetry doesn't pay the bills, especially not when your rent is 3 months overdue. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at Alexandra, saw the flush of embarrassment on her cheeks, and realized that Sarah had just revealed something deeply personal and painful. Alexandra was struggling financially, and Sarah was using it as a weapon. I think you should go, I said, standing up straighter. I'm sorry, did I miss something? Are you Alexandra's spokesperson now? Sarah's eyes narrowed, because last I checked, you were just the help. Sarah. Alexandra's voice was dangerous now, all pretense. Of politeness gone. Leave, now. Of course, darling. But think about what I said. The offer won't be available forever. Sarah gathered her purse, but she wasn't finished with me. And Isabel? A word of advice. In this industry, talent isn't enough. You need connections, resources, staying power. All things that Alexandra, bless her heart, can't provide. She swept out of the studio, leaving behind the lingering scent of expensive perfume and poison. Alexandra and I stood in the aftermath, the air still crackling with tension. Is it true? I asked quietly. About the rent? Alexandra's shoulders sagged. I didn't want you to know. Didn't want anyone to know. Why didn't you tell me? Because... She turned to face me, and I saw vulnerability in her eyes that made my heart ache. Because I wanted you to believe in what we're doing, not because you felt sorry for me. I moved closer until we were standing inches apart. Alexandra, I don't feel sorry for you. I admire you. What you're doing, what you're trying to build, it matters. It's important. Important doesn't pay the bills, she said, echoing Sarah's words. No, but it feeds the soul. And in the long run, that's what sustains us. I reached out, cupping her face in my hands. Don't let her poison this. Don't let her make you believe that caring about something more than profit is weakness. Isabel, she whispered, and I could see the war playing out in her eyes. Doubt warring with hope, practicality battling with passion. We'll figure it out, I said, together. That night, after Alexandra had gone home, I stayed in the studio, working, underjoined by lamplight. I was determined to prove that sustainable fashion could be commercially successful, that beauty and responsibility weren't mutually exclusive. I sketched until my fingers cramped, my mind racing with possibilities. I didn't know then that Sarah Matthews had planted a seed of doubt that would grow into something much more dangerous. I didn't know that she was already making phone calls, spreading whispers about Alexandra's financial troubles and her unprofessional relationship with her collaborator. I didn't know that our love story was about to become a scandal that would threaten everything we'd built. But I did know that I was falling in love with Alexandra Torres, and that for the first time in my life, I was willing to fight for something, someone who mattered. The photograph appeared on page 6 3 weeks later, and it changed everything. There we were, caught in a moment I thought was private, in the studio after a long day of work. Alexandra was pinning fabric on me for a fitting, her face intent, with concentration, and I was laughing at something she'd said. Our bodies were close, her hands on my waist, and the way we were looking at each other. Well, it told a story that was impossible to deny. Fashion's new power couple, read the headline. Designer Alexandra Torres and model Isabel Chens. Late night fittings exposed. I stared at the tabloid in shock, my coffee growing cold in my hands. The article was a masterpiece of innuendo, suggesting that our professional collaboration was anything but professional. It quoted anonymous sources about inappropriate behavior and conflicts of interest. It mentioned Alexandra's financial troubles and implied that I was somehow taking advantage of her vulnerability. How did they even get this photo? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Alexandra was pacing her studio like a caged animal, her phone buzzing incessantly with calls from reporters, competitors, and concerned friends. I don't know. We were careful. We always kept things professional in public. But even as she said it, we both knew it wasn't entirely true. There had been moments, stolen glances, accidental touches, the electricity that sparked between. US whenever we were in the same room. We'd been fooling ourselves if we thought no one would notice. Alexandra, I said gently, maybe we should talk about what this means. She stopped pacing and looked at me, her dark eyes filled with anguish. What it means is that I'm probably finished. Do you know what this industry does to people who don't play by the rules? Especially women who don't play by the rules? As if summoned by her words, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her face went pale. It's Marcus Steinberg. I watched her take the call, saw her face crumble with each word. When she hung up, she didn't need to tell me what had happened. I could see it in her posture, in the way she seemed to fold in on herself. The offer's been withdrawn, she said. Quietly, he said he can't afford to be associated with this kind of controversy. There are other opportunities, I said, trying to inject hope into my voice. Are there? Look at this. She gestured to her phone, which was displaying a flood of social media posts. Some were supportive, celebrating love and authenticity. But others were vicious, calling Alexandra unprofessional, suggesting that I was a gold digger, questioning whether our relationship was even real or just a publicity stunt. The fashion world was recoiling like we'd committed some cardinal sin. Whispers of unprofessionalism followed us everywhere. Investors who had been interested in Alexandra's work suddenly became unreachable. Orders for her existing pieces were canceled. The dream we'd been building together was crumbling in real time. Maybe, Alexandra said, not meeting my eyes, we should take a break. From the collaboration, from ... this. This, I repeated, my heart breaking. Us, whatever this is between us. Maybe they're right. Maybe I did let personal feelings compromise my judgment. I stood up, anger and hurt warring in my chest. So you're just going to let them win? Let them dictate who you can care about? I'm trying to save my business by sacrificing your happiness? What happiness, Isabel? Look around. My business is failing, my reputation is in ruins, and now I've dragged you down with me. What kind of future is that? I moved toward her, but she stepped back, maintaining distance. The kind of future where we face things together, where we don't let fear make our decisions for us. It's not fear, it's pragmatism. It's fear, I insisted. Fear of what people will say, fear of failure, fear of being vulnerable, but mostly fear of admitting that what we have is real and worth fighting for. That's when the reporters showed up. We heard them before we saw them, voices calling Alexandra's name, the sound of multiple cars pulling up outside the studio. Through the window, we could see cameras and microphones, a small crowd gathering. "We have to go out there," I said. "We have to face this." "No," Alexandra said, shaking her head. "I can't. I won't give them more ammunition." "Then they control the narrative. They get to decide what our story is." She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact moment she made her decision. It wasn't the decision I wanted, but it was the one she felt she had to make. "I think you should go," she said quietly. "Out the back, I'll handle this." "Alexandra, no." "We're in this together." "No, we're not. This is my mess, my career, my choice, and I'm choosing to protect you from it." I felt tears prick my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "What if I don't want to be protected?" "Then you're not thinking clearly." The words hung between us like a sword. I realized that this was it, the moment when everything we built would either stand or fall. Alexandra was choosing to face the storm alone, and in doing so, she was choosing to let fear win. "Fine," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my heart. "But I want you to know that you're wrong. About us, about what we have, about what's worth fighting for." I headed for the back exit, but halfway there, I stopped. The reporters were still calling her name, still waiting for a statement. Alexandra was going to face them alone, and she was going to give them exactly what they expected: another fashion industry scandal, another story of professional ambition trumping personal happiness. That's when I made my choice. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. The cameras immediately swung toward me, and I heard Alexandra gasp behind me. "Isabel, what are you doing?" I stepped outside into the glare of the lights and the shouted questions. Alexandra followed, her face pale but determined. "Is it true about your relationship?" someone shouted. "Are you using each other for career advancement? How long has this been going on?" I looked back at Alexandra, saw the fear and uncertainty in her eyes, and made a decision that would change both our lives forever. "Yes," I said, my voice carrying over the crowd. "We're in love. No, it's not a phase or a publicity stunt. And no, we're not apologizing for it." I reached out and took Alexandra's hand, felt her fingers tremble in mine. For a moment, I thought she might pull away, might retreat back into the safety of denial. But then she squeezed my hand, stepped closer, and faced the cameras with me. "Isabel's right," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "We're in love. We're partners in every sense of the word. And if that's a problem for this industry, then maybe the industry needs to change." The cameras flashed, the reporters shouted more questions, but I barely heard them, because Alexandra was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Pride, determination, and something that looked a lot like hope. Going public meant losing everything we thought we wanted, but it also meant gaining something we'd never expected: the freedom to be ourselves, completely and without apology. The backlash was swift and brutal. Within hours of our impromptu press conference, Alexandra's studio was flooded with cancellations. Boutiques that had carried her pieces suddenly found excuses to return them. Fashion bloggers who had once praised her innovative approach to sustainability now wrote scathing reviews questioning her professionalism. Even some of her loyal customers began to distance themselves, uncomfortable with the controversy. But something unexpected happened too. For every door that closed, two more opened. Young designers reached out, inspired by our refusal to hide. Sustainable fashion advocates rallied around us, seeing our story as a symbol of authenticity in an industry built on artifice. Media requests poured in from outlets that wanted to hear our side of the story. "Look at this," I said, scrolling through social media responses on my phone. "This woman says seeing us be open about our relationship gave her the courage to come." out to her family. This designer wants to collaborate on a pride collection. This blogger is starting a series about LGBTQ plus representation in fashion. Alexandra was hunched over her sewing machine, working on a new piece with an intensity that bordered on obsession. She'd barely slept in the past week, channeling her anxiety and determination into her work. "That's nice," she said without looking up, "but inspiration doesn't pay the bills." "No, but it does something better. It changes the world." She finally looked at me, and I saw the exhaustion in her eyes. "I'm tired of being a symbol, Isabel. I just want to make beautiful clothes." "Then let's make beautiful clothes, but let's do it our way." That's when I told her about the idea that had been forming in my mind. Instead of trying to work within the existing fashion system, what if we created our own? What if we built something entirely new? Something that reflected our values and our vision? "A fashion cooperative," I explained, my excitement growing as I spoke. "A collective of designers who share resources, support each other, and prioritize sustainability and ethical practices over profit margins." Alexandra's hands stilled on her fabric. "That's ambitious. It's necessary. The old system is broken. It's exclusionary, it's environmentally destructive, and it's built on the idea that personal lives and professional lives can't intersect. We know that's not true. We know that the best work comes from authenticity, from bringing your whole self to what you do." Over the next few months, we threw ourselves into building this new vision. We reached out to other designers who had felt marginalized by the mainstream industry, young creators, people of color, LGBTQ artists, anyone who had been told their voice didn't matter. We organized workshops on sustainable production techniques, created a resource sharing network, and established a fund to support emerging designers. The work was exhausting, but it was also exhilarating. Every day brought new challenges and new possibilities. We were learning to be partners in every sense of the word: creative partners, business partners, and yes, romantic partners too. "I never thought I'd be running a nonprofit," Alexandra said one evening as we worked late in the studio, now transformed into the headquarters of our cooperative. "I never thought I'd be in love with my business partner," I replied, and she laughed. "How do you think we're doing?" "At the whole relationship thing, I mean." I considered the question seriously. We'd had our share of challenges, learning to separate creative disagreements from personal conflicts, figuring out how to maintain romance while building a business, dealing with the constant scrutiny that came with being a public couple. "I think we're doing okay," I said. "We're learning as we go." "Are you happy?" she asked, and I heard the vulnerability in her voice. "With you, always. With what we're building." "Most days." "With the impact we're having?" "Absolutely." That impact was becoming undeniable. The cooperative had grown to include over 50 designers across the country. Our workshops were attended by hundreds of people eager to learn about sustainable fashion. Major brands were starting to take notice of our approach, and some were even reaching out to explore collaborations. But the real validation came from unexpected sources. A teenage girl in Ohio wrote to tell us that seeing our relationship had helped her understand that she could be both professional and authentically herself. A group of fashion students in Paris started their own cooperative based on our model. A documentary filmmaker wanted to tell our story as part of a larger project about changemakers in fashion. "We're actually doing it," I said one day, looking around at the bustling studio filled with designers working on their latest projects. "Doing what?" "Changing the world. One thread at a time." The real test came when we were invited to participate in New York Fashion Week. It was the opportunity we've been working toward, the chance to show that sustainable fashion could compete on the biggest stage in the industry. "Are you ready for this?" Alexandra asked as we prepared for the show. Are you? She took my hand, and I felt the familiar spark that had been there since that first moment on the sidewalk. With you? I'm ready for anything. The show was a revelation. Models of all sizes, ages, and backgrounds walked the runway in clothes that were both beautiful and responsible. Each piece told a story of materials rescued from waste streams, of traditional techniques preserved and honored, of designers who had found their voice despite being told they didn't belong. Audience was captivated. Fashion editors who had initially dismissed us as idealistic took notes furiously. Buyers who had written off sustainable fashion as unmarketable placed orders. Young designers in the audience saw a possibility where they had once seen only barriers. But for me, the most important moment came when Alexandra took the microphone. For her closing statement, fashion shouldn't just look good, she said, her voice steady and strong. It should do good. It should reflect who we are, not who we think we should be. It should bring us together, not divide us. And it should leave the world better than we found it. The applause was thunderous, but I barely heard it. I was too busy watching Alexandra, seeing the confidence and joy on her face, knowing that we had found our way to something true and beautiful and lasting. 1 year later, I was standing in our studio, now expanded to include a retail space, a classroom, and a small cafe, putting the finishing touches on my latest design. It was a wedding dress, actually, commissioned by a bride who wanted something that reflected her values as much as her style. The gown was constructed entirely from vintage fabrics sourced from estate sales and thrift stores. Each piece carefully restored and incorporated into a design that was both timeless and completely unique. She's going to love it, Alexandra said, emerging from the back room where she'd been working on her own project, a suit for the same bride's partner, designed with the same attention to sustainability and craftsmanship. I hope so. I've never made a wedding dress before. You've never made a lot of things before. Hasn't stopped you yet? I smiled, thinking about how much had changed since that morning when we'd literally collided on the sidewalk. The cooperative now had over 200 members worldwide. Our sustainable fashion workshops had been featured in major magazines. We'd been invited to speak at conferences, teach at universities, and consult with brands looking to transform their practices. More importantly, we'd learned to navigate the complex dance of being both partners and collaborators. We'd established boundaries, created systems for handling disagreements, and found ways to support each other's individual growth while building something together. How was the fitting with the Morrison collection? I asked, referring to a luxury brand that had hired us to consult on their sustainability initiatives. Productive. They're finally ready to commit to fully traceable supply chains. It's going to be expensive, but they're willing to do it. That's huge. It is. And it's all because of what we started here. What you started, really. I looked at her curiously. What do you mean? That first day, when you laughed instead of getting angry. When you saw possibility instead of disaster, that changed everything for me. You would have figured it out eventually. No, I wouldn't have. I was too focused on what I thought I was supposed to want instead of what I actually wanted. You showed me the difference. There was something different about her tone, something that made me set down my sewing and give her my full attention. Isabel, she said, and I noticed she was fidgeting with something in her pocket. I have something for you. If it's another coffee, I'm already sufficiently caffeinated. It's not coffee. She pulled out a small box, and my breath caught. It's something I've been working on for a while now. Something I made just for you. With trembling hands, I opened the box. Inside was a ring unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was clearly handmade with a vintage band that looked like it had been lovingly restored. But the stone wasn't a traditional diamond. Instead, it was a piece of sea glass, frosted green and perfectly smooth. set in a design that incorporated tiny fragments of fabric from our very first collaboration. Alexandra, I breathed, it's beautiful. The glasses from the beach where my grandmother used to take me as a child. The band was hers. She left it to me when she passed. And the fabric double quotes, she smiled. That's from the first dress we made together, the one that started everything. I looked up at her, and she was on one knee beside my sewing table, surrounded by the tools and materials of our shared passion. Isabel Chen, she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. You fixed my bike tire that first day, remember? Actually, you didn't fix it, you made it worse. But you fixed everything else. My designs, my business, my perspective. My heart, I was crying now, not caring that tears were probably ruining my makeup. This woman, this incredible, passionate, brilliant woman who had crashed into my life and changed everything. You showed me that love and work don't have to be separate, she continued. That the best creations come from bringing your whole self to what you do. That authenticity isn't a weakness, it's a superpower. She swallowed hard, and I could see her gathering her courage for the next part. I want to spend the rest of my life creating beautiful things with you. Not just clothes, but a life, a legacy, a love story that inspires others to be brave enough to be themselves. So, She paused, and I realized I was holding my breath. Will you marry me? The question hung in the air between us, surrounded by the quiet hum of sewing machines and the distant sound of traffic. This space that had become our sanctuary, our laboratory, our home. Yes, I whispered, then louder. Yes, of course, yes. She slipped the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly. Of course it did. Alexandra had been watching me work for over a year, had seen my hands in action countless times. She knew exactly how to make something that would be part of me. We kissed then, surrounded by the evidence of everything we'd built together. The mannequins draped with our latest designs, the wall of photos showing all the designers we'd supported, the awards we'd won, the life we'd created from the ashes of that first disaster. I love you, I said against her lips. I love what? We've built, what we're building, who we are together. I love you too, she replied. And I love that we're going to keep surprising each other for the rest of our lives. 2 years later, standing in front of the mirror in our bedroom above the expanded studio, I adjusted the flowing skirt of my wedding dress one last time. It was the same dress I'd been working on that day Alexandra proposed. I'd fallen so in love with the design that I decided to wear it myself with a few modifications. Are you ready? Alexandra asked, appearing in the doorway. She looked stunning in the custom suit she'd designed for herself, a perfect blend of masculine and feminine elements that reflected her personal style. I've been ready since the day. You knocked me off my feet, I said, and she laughed. Literally and figuratively, the best kind of disaster. We'd decided to hold the ceremony in the studio, surrounded by all the people who would become part of our extended family. Designers from the cooperative, friends from the fashion world who had supported us through the controversy, family members who had learned to love us not despite our unconventional path but because of it. The ceremony was officiated by Maria Sentis, one of the first designers to join our cooperative, who had become ordained specifically for this occasion. Our vows were written on fabric samples, sewn into small booklets that we would keep forever. Isabel, Alexandra said, her voice carrying clearly through the space, you taught me that the most beautiful creations come from taking discarded pieces and making them into something new. That's what you did with my broken dreams, my scattered plans, my guarded heart. You saw the potential in the scraps and helped me weave them into something beautiful. Alexandra, I replied, my voice steady despite the emotion in my heart. You showed me that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who makes you want to be the best version of yourself. You challenged me to be braver, to think bigger, to never settle for less than authentic. You are my collaborator, my inspiration, my home. As we exchange rings, Alexandra wore a band I designed to complement her grandmother's ring, made from reclaimed gold and set with a small stone from the same beach where she'd found my sea glass. I thought about the journey that had brought us here. We'd learned that love, like sustainable fashion, requires intention, patience, and the willingness to do things differently. It means choosing quality over quantity, authenticity over convention, and the long view over short-term gains. I now pronounce you partners in all things, Maria said, grinning widely. You may kiss your wife. And we did, to the cheers of our friends and family, surrounded by the tools of our trade and the evidence of our shared dreams. The reception was held in the courtyard behind the studio, under lights strung between the trees. The food was prepared by a catering collective that shared our values. The flowers were locally sourced and would be composted afterward. And the music was provided by a friend who had started making instruments from reclaimed materials. But the most special moment came when Sarah Matthews approached us during the dancing. I hadn't seen her since that day in the studio, though. I'd heard she'd been struggling with her own business challenges. Congratulations, she said, and I could see that she meant it. I owe you both an apology. I was wrong about, well, about everything. Sarah, Alexandra said gently, what's done is done. No, let me say this. I was scared. Scared of change. Scared of being left behind. Scared of admitting that maybe there was a better way to do things. Watching what you've built, seeing how you've changed the industry, it's inspired me to look at my own practices. Change is always possible, I said. If you're serious about it, we'd be happy to help. She smiled, and for the first time since I'd known her, it looked genuine. I'd like that. As the evening wound down and our guests began to drift away, Alexandra and I found ourselves alone in the courtyard, swaying to music that was now playing softly from a speaker. So, she said, how does it feel to be married to your business partner? Complicated, I admitted. But the best kind of complicated? Any regrets? I considered the question seriously. Our path hadn't been easy. We'd faced criticism, financial uncertainty, and the constant challenge of balancing our personal relationship with our professional ambitions. But we'd also created something beautiful and meaningful, something that was changing the industry we loved. Only one, I said finally. What's that? I wish that girl who got knocked down on the sidewalk 2 years ago could see this. Could see that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected collisions. I think she knows, Alexandra said, spinning me gently. I think she's right here, dancing with the woman who changed her life. And I think the woman on the bicycle knows too, that sometimes slowing down long enough to help someone up is the most important thing you can do. We danced until the last song ended, then walked hand in hand back into the studio, ready to begin the next chapter of our story. The mannequin stood sentinel in the moonlight, draped with dreams made manifest, and I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. After all, the best love stories aren't about finding someone who completes you. They're about finding someone who inspires you to become the person you were meant to be. And the best business partnerships aren't about finding someone who agrees with you. They're about finding someone who challenges you to do better, be better, create better. In Alexandra, I had found both. And in the life we'd built together, messy, complicated, beautiful, and authentically ours, I had found home. The pattern continues, one stitch at a time, one day at a time, one dream at a time. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, all those individual threads weave together into something extraordinary, something that fits perfectly, even though you never could have designed it yourself. Something like love.